Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith and we are now in 2021. So happy New Year's to everybody watching. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to check out this video. And really, you can think of this video, my top 10 solo games from 2020, as a follow-up or comparison video to one of the other list videos that I put out recently, about a week and a half ago or so. And that one was focused on the Rolling Solo community, where I polled them to find out what games would make up their top 15 list. So there was a little bit more on their list in terms of the number of games. With my list here today, you're going to see my top 10, but you're also going to see a handful of games that didn't quite make the list. And there's two interesting categories outside of my top 10 that you'll see me go through. The first one is pretty common to most lists, which is honorable mentions. The other one is going to be a grouping of games that I just haven't played enough to say whether they're in the top 10 or out of the top 10 completely. In other words, I need a little bit more playtime with them, or maybe they arrived a little bit late in 2020, almost too late for me to make a definitive selection on them. So with all that said, I also want to mention, if you make it to the very end of the video, there's going to be a little bit of a surprise as a thank you for the support of the Rolling Solo community throughout the whole year. So just wanted to mention that. You'll notice that talked about at the end of the video here. Starting off with the first of 3 games that I've played, but haven't played enough of them to put them either on the top 10 or exclude them completely, is Kingdom Rush Rift in Time. Now, this one on the onset appears to have heart and soul. This game, if you like defending your kingdom in a tower defense style game on the tabletop, you are going to like this game. And in a solo fashion, it's actually popular, very popular, and being talked about quite a bit. So I wanted to make mention of the fact that even though this isn't in my top 10 list, I am going to be diving into this game further, as my interest is extremely high on this one in January. So you will see more about this game on the channel, and we'll discover that stuff together, which I'm excited for, so I can actually get even more plays in, get even better feel for the game. This one came a little bit late in 2020. I wasn't able to really play it enough to concretely put it in my top 10, but definitely worth a mention here. And Lucky Duck Games is knocking out home runs with their games in 2020 for solo. The second game that I've played but haven't played enough of it to seat it on or off my top 10 list here today is Aliens: Another Glorious Day in the Corpse. I think for solo gamers, this is one that's definitely worth mentioning. It popped on my radar, just like the Aliens, very late in 2020. So because of that, I don't really have a real good feel for this game just yet, but I hope to get more plays in soon, so I can kind of make a more definitive thought in my brain in terms of whether this is going to be a keeper or something that I give away. But as you can see right now, it's rated quite high. And for me, this came completely out of left field. Like I heard people in my Rolling Solo community mention this game like crazy. And then it was kind of like, okay, where is this coming from? What is this about? Besides the fact that obviously it's got the IP tie into Aliens. So if you love Aliens, boom, there you go. But at the same time, the IP, that's only a small portion of the pie. You still have to have gameplay behind it. And from what I've seen so far, I'm intrigued to play more. But again, that's the reason why it's not on my list, because I haven't played enough of it to really make that definitive choice yet. I'll show you a couple pictures here. One thing to make note, if you are going after this one, first off, it's going to be hard to find. It was actually quite an effort just to get the core box by itself. I'm still seeking out expansions to see if I can fill out the rest of the game. But one thing to make note of is you will have to do some assembly on the miniatures. So if you're a person that's kind of like, miniatures and assembly, nope, then you may not want to go after this one. But if you're somebody who doesn't mind just gluing a few things together, the game does look really good on the table, and the miniatures actually look pretty good too. So I'm hoping that as I play through it more and more, that I'll have a more definitive thought on it. But let me know in the comments below. I'm sure some of you guys maybe have this already. You've played it already enough to, decide whether or not this thing would belong on your top 10 or top 5. And as we go along, in the comments down below, please fill that out. And that final one is Lost Ruins of Arnak. And this is one that I definitely want to give a little bit more time to. I want to dive in a little bit deeper than what I've played so far, which is quite surface level of this one so far. But in terms of his presence on the table and the look of it, I think solo gamers are going to be like, yeah, this looks interesting. This is pretty cool. And the artwork is really good. The gameplay so far from what I've played, again, very, very limited plays with this one so far. But I've enjoyed it. But I don't know where I seed it just yet. I think I need to give it more time. But this is one to kind of watch, I think. And again, CGE has actually put out quite a few solo-based games recently that are quite popular. So I've got high hopes for this one. You can see here on BGG, the community saying that 3-player is actually the best way to play, but solo is also recommended quite nicely as well. So again, just another one to put on your radar, not on my top 10, something I didn't play enough of to really have a feel for it just yet, but one that's definitely worth keeping your eye on. What's really interesting to note, though, is remember earlier when I was talking about comparing my list here, or at least the games I mentioned in this video anyway, with the top 15 solo games from the rolling solo community. And taking a look back at that video, you'll notice none of the 3 games I just mentioned right now, even these ones I haven't played enough, were on that list, which I find quite interesting as well, because I actually kind of thought some of these might actually land. But again, it might be a case of the same situation I ran into, where a lot of these games came at the very tail end of 2020. So people haven't really got their feet grounded in what the game has to offer just yet, and are kind of holding back on whether they think it should actually be up that high. All right, let's move into the honorable mentions, starting off with Wraithbusters Project Vril. So these honorable mentions are going to be games that I have definitely played enough of, but just were shy of making the top 10 list. Wraithbusters was actually in the 15th position on my Rolling Solo Community's top 15 list. So that was at the bottom of the list. For me, this just falls short of my top 10 list. I did really enjoy my time with this one. I still have the game. I still have everything for it. And actually, when I received it, I really enjoyed diving in and clearing up the rules for individuals that were struggling with the game when it first came out. The rule book wasn't so clear in certain sections, and some of the rules were kind of sporadically clipped into different areas. The game has obviously gone through some feedback with a 1.5 version of the rules, so that's something I'm definitely looking forward to. There's also some individuals that are constantly working on solo creation for scenarios with this game that I mentioned, and I won't go through that again, but if you want to see more information on this one, because I did talk about it in length, you can check out that other video I'm comparing this to, that Rolling Solo Top 15 community list that I put out a couple weeks ago. That one shows in depth exactly where you can find those scenarios. But this is one that I definitely think is worth checking out. If you're into the kind of the alternate reality World War II kind of setting, it's a little bit off the rails goofy kind of thing. But it also has a serious tone to it too. So it kind of rides a little bit of both spectrums. I enjoy the game, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Mythic does in terms of cleaning it up as well. The second honorable mention today is Solar Storm from 2020 in Dranda Games, and this one, just so you guys are aware, on my Rolling Solo Community Top 15, this landed in the 7th position. So for me, this didn't even land in my top 10. Again, this is just my opinion, just personal taste. This is a great game, though, and I completely understand why the community had it up in their top 15 and even as ranked as highly as 7, which is pretty high, but it's justified. This game is well done, and the solo community does enjoy it as well. I do recommend this one. So one thing that's really cool about this year is that I found that even maybe separate from any other years past doing the channel, this is a really strong year for small to medium box solo games. It's a really strong year, and that might be to do with the fact that a lot of Kickstarters, in terms of their deliveries and everything else, were delayed or pushed. Some of them showed up at the end of 2020. Some of them aren't showing up till next year. So it kind of gave some time for these small box games to push through the crowd, which is awesome, because sometimes you get oversaturated with these large games. And I love when you get these tiny little games that show up and they pack a huge punch. So this is a game that if you are into like deck management and you're into hand management, all that kind of stuff, you're going to want to get in on this one. Literally, the description is all you need to see. You work together to repair a ship. So you're repairing your ship before you burn in the scorching abyss. That's literally what you're doing. You're trying to keep your ship up and not let it go down. And you're going to have all kinds of issues in different locations of your ship you're going to be dealing with. You got your resource cards you're going to be dealing with constantly. I struggle with this one even too, because even though it's in my honorable mentions, I could just as much make an argument as to why this should be in my top 10. So, like, this is what's fun about making a top 10 list, is like half the time you make the list, and then even later on when you're talking about the ones you didn't include, you're like, maybe I should have put it on the list. But yeah, good choice. The third honorable mention for my top 10 list is Night of the Living Dead, a Zombicide game. This was in the 10th position out of 15 games on my Rolling Solo Community top 15. So this one made the list of their top 10, but didn't make mine. Now, again, like I said earlier, these games could slot into that 10th position, and I honestly believe that this iteration of Zombicide is worth talking about in 2020. There have been so many Zombicide versions in the past, but you still have to remember there's a lot of new solo gamers coming into the hobby, and even if you've experienced Zombicide 1,000 times and you're done with it, there's somebody coming into the hobby who has never experienced it, and it's going to be their way into this crazy, crazy world of solo games. So for that reason, when an actual game goes from being a behemoth on the table to something that you can consume in a single box, that, in my opinion, is when it's worth putting on a list. And that's why I think Night of the Living Dead deserves to be here, is it introduces some new mechanics in terms of Zombicide. It also just, it's compact. I mean, when has that ever happened? I mentioned this in the prior video as well, because my Rolling Solo community had put it on there. So I'm going to be saying some of the similar things, but that's my reasoning as to why it needs to be mentioned as an honorable mention. Is it does what the prior versions couldn't do, which was keep things simple. The game itself is simple, essentially, but because of how much there was for those Kickstarter versions, it became slightly complex to just manage. Whereas this game is a simple iteration, simple rule set, and a simple amount of components. Perfect. And that's what most people, I think, are looking for right now in a solo capacity. So this is a good one. I definitely recommend this one. There's not much voting going on this at all. But this is one that doesn't make my top 10. I enjoyed my time with it. We did a full playthrough on the channel, and it will stay in my collection as probably the Zombicide version that I enjoy the most. But as of right now, this is it. The final honorable mention goes to Rallyman GT from 2020, and this is another one that really crept up on me out of nowhere. It wasn't really something that was on my radar all that much. I'm not crazy into racing, so it wasn't something that was like super pulling at me, but when I started to actually entertain this one, I really saw something there that I enjoyed. And you can see here that you're going to be going ahead, putting these tracks out, racing. Of course, being that it's racing, you're going to be tracking your times and trying to win and get the best time. But what the coolest thing about Rallyman GT is when you're playing solo, yes, you're playing against other, technically you're playing against the AI within the game itself, but you can also do what they mentioned down here, which you can literally go ahead and join kind of a community. And when I say kind of a community, it literally is a community that is extremely active in terms of hosting monthly challenges, there's championships, World Cups, and you're literally going to race for times and compare yourself up against other people that are playing the game on a monthly basis. That just elevates the game from being kind of, it's good, to this is intriguing, this is interesting. Because now when you're investing the time as a solo gamer, setting up your game, running your trials, it's not just you kind of sitting there pumping your fist going, look at me, I got a wicked time that last time. Now you're going, I got this time. I wonder what, the rest of the community is doing. I wonder how well I'm doing in comparison to everybody else. So it's a solo game, but with a community aspect or maybe a competitive aspect around it, which could drive you to play the game solo by yourself a lot more often, which is pretty cool. So there's something to be said for that, and it's definitely interesting. So for those of you that didn't know anything about this one, hopefully this kind of points you in that direction. There also was a dirt version of this game, I think, that went to Kickstarter. It's also worth mentioning that this game was not on my Rolling Solo Community's top 15 list. All right, we made it to my top 10 solo games from 2020, starting off with Marvel United. We're starting off real light. I don't know what it was about this year, but for some reason I was gravitating towards not light games, but small box games and medium box games. Not as much of the heavy games really hit the table that often. It might have just been the way 2020, occurred and how crazy and up and down and wild it was in every fashion you could possibly imagine. But having quick games to get to the table and then pack up and move on to something else was just something that I was kind of enjoying throughout the year. So this was one of them. Now, I only have the base game for this right now. I do have the rest of the Kickstarter coming, which will give me more expansions and things like that. This has already gone to retail, the base game, and you can some of the expansions will also be going to retail as well. So for me, in terms of putting this in the 10th position, This is one that I think could have been a great candidate to potentially be swapped out with one of my honorable mentions, just because I wasn't 100% sure if it deserved the 10th spot or it could have been an honorable mention. I could have flip-flopped there. But I like what this game does, and I also am kind of on an MCU kick this year. I watched that string of movies in chronological order a couple times. I was just getting right into it. So games that had the Marvel theme attached to it grabbed me a little bit more. And then on top of it, this game was quick to the table, like 40 minutes playing time. That's super fast, easy to do. The game looks great on the table. It's not complex. And you can, of course, watch some playthroughs. I also have a setup video that I recently released on the channel, and we'll be diving into a playthrough. So I'm looking forward to that, showing you guys what it's all about. But if you haven't heard of this one, it's worth looking into if you're looking for something that's not complex and it's going to take you a low amount of time to play. That's really where this thing's going to shine. And as you can see from a solo perspective, not a ton of people have voted yet, but people are enjoying it in a solo capacity. Now, it's worth mentioning for Marvel United that one was not on the list for the top 15 for my rolling solo community. So that was simply my personal choice there to put it in the 10th position for my list. Aeon's End Outcast is my next selection for the 9th position on my top 10. And this is really going to add a campaign aspect to Aeon's End. Now, not for the first time, because this was actually introduced in the prior iteration you can see right here for New Age, and kind of builds on that to allow you to replay content you have in a campaign format. So if you're looking for this game to merge, turn into a campaign style of play, this is the kind of thing you're going to be wanting to go after. Aeon's End has been known in the solo community as a staple for a long time. There's lots of iterations to get in on it. I've mentioned it. I've covered it. I think this might be the last time for me personally that my interest level will be as high as it is, because I think at this point I'm starting to get to the tail end of my journey with it. In other words, I spent so much time with it that I believe I'm going to move on to something else. But in terms of solo gamers that haven't been enjoying this, or only been enjoying it for maybe a year or two or a few years, and you haven't consumed a number of the expansions that have come out for this one, it's a fantastic deck building game. Like, you need to experience this thing. Even from the very beginning with the original Aeon's End, even though it wasn't perfect, what it was doing was just so special when it first came out. And then, of course, they just built upon that foundation as they went along. And in my opinion, the iterations that have come out over time have made the game better. This is widely known as being a very popular solo game in general. So definitely a solid 9 for me on the list, and I don't think this one would waver in 2020. And it's worth mentioning that my rolling solo community had Aeon's End Outcast in the 6th position in their top 15. In the 8th position on the list, we have Alter Quest from Blacklist Games. It's also worth mentioning that this was in the 3rd position out of 15 games for my rolling solo community. So there is a difference here in terms of where we position things, but this one was on both lists. And I do believe this one is a solid entry. The MDS system for me at this point, being that Street Masters is where I was introduced to it for the first time, and it was done perfectly. It couldn't have been a better game to pair that system with than Street Masters. I still think if MDS was released with Brook City or Alter Quest or any of their other iterations with MDS, Street Masters still was the one that worked the best with that system by a long shot, in my opinion. For me, this is probably the last iteration of the MDS system from Blacklist Games that I'm going to be as excited about. And I think going forward, my drive to play MDS games have kind of hit their peak, because I think I found that I enjoy what they've done with Alter Quest and Street Masters so much that I don't think I really need to see it in a different iteration of a game at this point. Now, it isn't to say that I wouldn't be pulled based on a theme or something like that, but I think at this point between Street Masters and Alter Quest, I'm pretty happy. So for those of you that don't know much about it, the game has a decent weight to it. If you're wondering about the rule book, there has been comments that it's a bit to get through and kind of get your head around the game. You will have to play the game a couple times to get past barriers to really get to the point where you feel comfortable with what's going on. So that's maybe on the negative side of it. But in terms of its production and its actual gameplay, once you get over that learning hump, It's actually really fun and very enjoyable, and it looks really good on the table too. Do I think this is a solid entry? Yes. For dungeon crawls this year, there really wasn't a ton. So in my opinion, this was one of very few that shone through. There was a bunch of other ones, but they didn't hit my radar, and they also weren't of high interest to me for 2020. This one was the one that really stuck. In position number 7, I have Title Blades, Heroes of the Reef, and this is a big difference for my rolling solo community, where this was actually on the 13th position out of 15 on the list. So this one has risen way up on mine, and I really think there is something special going on with this one. This is actually the first time I've played a Druid City game, Skybound game, solo game of anything. So I was really, and I am very impressed with what they've gone ahead and put together on the solo side of things. It doesn't in the least feel, tacked on or poorly executed. I actually am quite pleased with what they've gone ahead and done with this. And again, the production quality on this one was off the charts. I love the look of it on the table. It's got such a different vibe than anything I have in my collection. I could go on about this one for a while. I also love the dice mechanics in the game. But if you have the deluxe version from the Kickstarter, it's beautiful. Even if you don't have the deluxe and you just have the retail version, it still looks so good. And I wouldn't be surprised, based on the fact that this actually mentions part 1, that there will likely be more, because the game has been rated quite highly by solo gamers and the community in general. And I really think they're going to go after another iteration or maybe a follow-up to this one. It's probably already in the works. This is just above average, and I'd say that's pretty bang on. Like, you're going to have to get through the rulebook to get going, but it's a regular rulebook in terms of its learning for the size of the game that it is. But this is a solid 7 for me. In the 6th position on my top 10 list is Aetherfields from Awakened Realms, and it's worth mentioning my rolling solo community had this in the 2nd position number 2 out of 15 games. So there's not too much of a difference in terms of its positioning between the two lists. In terms of Aetherfields and my time with it to this point, I found that when I first opened up the rulebook and was trying to organize things, it was a little bit confusing to figure out exactly what to organize and how to do it. One thing I will definitely point you guys to if you're opening up the box for the first time is this right here, Getting Started with Aetherfields. It's fantastic. The individual behind this one, big time kudos. You saved me some time. You saved a lot of other people some time too. This is going to essentially, and I'll zoom in on this so you guys can see this better, but it literally breaks down, like, not what decks not to touch, what decks to open up, and, to put them behind which dividers. And honestly, for this whole section, it seems like it's explaining a lot. Really, at the end of the day, all it's doing is it's pointing you to the rule book. On the right-hand side, I think of the 2nd or 3rd page, it talks about these dividers, and then it mentions what cards go behind them. And as soon as you see that and you see this section right here, it just clicks, and you're like, oh, that's how I put it all in there. So you sort it all in, you've got your cards all in, you're good to go, and then you can start your campaign. You can follow the starting campaign right here, but what I advise you actually do is stop right here. Use this just up to this other components piece in terms of getting the game organized in your box, and instead jump to a different file. Here you're going to find a Learn to Play walkthrough, which was posted in the Aetherfields forums general section by William. Big thank you to him. I believe this is going to end up in the file section at some point, but as you can see right here, there's a link to the Google Drive where you can download it, so I'll definitely show you that right now. And this is utterly fantastic. Like, this is exactly what people needed to see when they opened up Aetherfields for the first time. Not only do you have a really nice preparation and setup section right here in terms of everything that was talked about in that original kind of, black and white write-up, so you can just use this to understand exactly how to organize the game. They've gone ahead from the get-go and literally walking you through the initial dream, as well as the mechanisms that you need to understand as you actually encounter them in your first tutorial. This is really what was missing from the initial piece of Aetherfields in not overwhelming people with the amount of rules that needed to be learned, even though most of what was being learned in the rule book and the way it was presented wouldn't be learned until you actually run into it. This is going to take you through only the things you need to understand until you feel comfortable. So what's fantastic about this is that this was put together by two individuals, one person, Tarmo, and then William actually doing the tutorial work here to put this together, and then artwork by Tarmo. They both deserve huge credit for putting this together, and this is a massive plus for AR to have this, and it's so well done. The thing's only 4 pages long, and you've got everything here to understand what you're going to run into and how you're going to resolve it and what these icons all mean as you literally go through that tutorial. This is what you want to follow if you're playing the game. And then from that point on, you're on your way. I'll show you guys this. I'm not going to go through it piece by piece, but this is the official Aetherfield survival guide that basically dropped from Awakened Realms 14 hours ago, literally. So you can see here, it's got the introduction. If you don't know what to do, these are things you can try to do. So this is really going to help you if you're a person that, is new to the experience. If you're someone who's a veteran, you might actually find things in here that you didn't realize you need to double check or that could actually help you or be useful for you. So what they're doing here is giving people a little bit of a leg up that maybe wasn't mentioned so obviously in the rulebook in terms of like, hey, don't forget to do this or don't forget to use these to your advantage, that type of thing. And then they dive into some of the other areas like slumbers being good for you. The easy ones are better. Skipping can be worthwhile, like all that kind of stuff. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this makes it into whatever 1.5 or 1.1 or whatever version will comes out in the future to tweak that rule book. For me personally, I'm enjoying my time with Aetherfields overall. I'm pretty happy with it being in the 6th position. I feel like that's a pretty safe spot. It could end up going down from there, or it could end up going up. It's a weird one. It could be, for me, it could go either way. And where I currently sit with it is I'm enjoying it. I had to get over the hump of learning it like other people, but a lot of these documentation the community's put together has really helped. The game looks fantastic on the table, and the reason that it drives me to play it is I enjoy narrative-driven games like this. Not just as the only way I enjoy board games, but narrative games speak to me. I enjoy the immersion level that they kind of give you. And this one has immersion in spades. Like, it really does pull you into the universe that it's and the story that it's trying to tell you, which is pretty unknown and wild and wacky, being that it's a dream world, but it's really cool. And with that, that's going to round out the bottom half of my list. Now let's move to the top 5. We are definitely in top 5 territory now with Viscounts of the West Kingdom from Garful Games. This is the 3rd option within the West Kingdom trilogy, let's say. Within Raiders of the North Sea, there was 3, and within the West Kingdom, there have been 3. Really have enjoyed the West Kingdom series in general. And Viscounts is just as fun. And just to let you guys know, in terms of the gameplay and the weight side of things, this is definitely more on the heavier side. It's above average. It's not like super heavy, but it's above average. The game on the table looks really, really nice. And the gameplay is just as good. And I think this is one of those games that once you fall in love with one of them, that's when you start running around trying to get all of them. And that's what happened to me. I got into Raiders of the North Sea, and from that point on, literally every single time one of these things come out, I'm always grabbing it. Now, I may not get it the second it releases. Sometimes I grab it in retail later, but I always get them because I really do enjoy the actual gameplay behind each of these. They're always interesting. So in this one, again, VP points is what you're trying to do every single time. You're gaining points by building buildings, writing manuscripts, castles, acquiring deeds, all that good stuff. It's just so much fun. I love it. And I can't wait to see what comes out in the future. So I think this is a solid 5 for me. And these games have been creeping up my my top 10 list, top 15 list in the past. And I really think that this might be the first year that they've actually crested into the top 5. In the 4th position of my top 10 list is Dwellings of Eldervale. This comes from Breaking Games, the rolling solo community. In that prior video of 15 games, placed this one in the 8th position. So I've got it a bit higher up the list than they did. And I really believe there's something special about this one. And I think there's going to be longevity with this one that's going to help it. And this might creep up my list higher, or it might notch down a couple notches. For now, for me, I don't even own a physical copy of this game, but that just speaks to how much I've enjoyed it. I've had to actually consume this game in a digital medium because that's the only way I can actually play it. I was a silly individual, and when the Kickstarter landed, I pledged for it, but I think I pledged for $1, and then I missed the pledge manager completely. I don't know what happened, or if I didn't get the emails, or I just blanked out, but I didn't actually purchase it. And now I really, really want to purchase it, but I can't find it anywhere. And that makes perfect sense. This game is being grabbed all over the place, and any iteration of it is being gobbled up in seconds. And I can see why. Like, the game looks amazing on the table, but the crazy thing about this game is, again, because I've only experienced things digitally, I know the game plays good because I could care less about the table presence when I'm looking at a computer screen. Like, it looks fancy, sure, there's nice colors and the artwork looks good, but the gameplay itself is so nice and rock solid. I love it. And there's rumors of expansions coming in the future as well for this one, which makes me think that, like, this is something that really could have legs for the long haul. That's going to be the interesting with this one. I think that's why this one I toyed with potentially raising higher on my list, but I feel really comfortable with it being in the 4th position because it could inch its way up over time. And again, this is more of a wrap up list for 2020. But if I was to redo a wrap up list, let's say for 2020, maybe 3-4 months from now, maybe this one would creep up a little higher, or it might even kind of go down a couple pegs. It just depends. It's a worker placement game at its heart, so you do have to enjoy that aspect, and I do enjoy that aspect. I actually even recently was playing Everdell with my wife and a couple friends. Not playing solo. Horrible person I am. But I was teaching them all Everdell, and my wife already knows how to play. With teaching my friends, and we had a blast. Worker placement games are great. I do enjoy them, but I enjoy them so much more when there's a theme that actually captures me. And I think that's the reason why this one, pulled me in. Was I looked at it and went like, this just looks exciting. And then you find out it's worker placement. It's got a kind of the Euro vibe to it, and you're like, well, that doesn't matter. Like, I enjoy Euro games. And it's cool to see this merger of different types of games as time goes on, continuing. So this is a solid one. Definitely would recommend it. I think it's awesome. And I really hope in the long run, it has the legs to keep going up the list. In position number 3 on my top 10 list is Warp's Edge from Renegade Game Studios. It was in the 5th position on my Rolling Solo Community's top 15 list. So that is actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that might be the closest that the two lists have gotten, is within 2 of each other, I think, unless I missed something along the way. So that's pretty close, and it's quite agreeable that this game, being that it only plays solo, kind of rose up the list so highly, and I really do enjoy this. Now, there's not a lot of rankings here to go by, but I got to tell you right now that this year, I don't know what it is again with 2020, but maybe again it has something to do with the fact some of the bigger box games just didn't make it through as much. But it's awesome because it's kind of shining a light on all these all these small box games that are soloable, and people are eating them up. And the crazy thing is, they're good. They're really, really good. And this is another one that I would love to actually show you guys on the channel in the future. But I'm enjoying my time with this one. I've wanted to play this one over and over and over again. It's a quick play, like it's 30 minutes once you know, maybe even a little less if you actually know the rules really, really well. But you will enjoy this. And again, it's one that's relatively safe. Like, you can pick this game up for relatively cheap. And even if it doesn't work for you, you're not out a whole bunch of money. But I can tell you right now, you're probably going to like this as a filler solo game, or something to kind of just get to the table really quickly when you don't have the time to set up a massive footprint of a game. You can see it doesn't take up all that much space. But what it packs in terms of gameplay on the table is a massive punch. This is one that I would definitely recommend. You should go out and experience these games in some fashion. You may not want to purchase them because you might want to watch a playthrough or do something like that, but these are ones that, like, you want to, like, dig into a little bit further because they might be a hit for you. But again, Warp's Edge was 5 on my Rolling Solo Community's top 15 list, and mine here is at 3. So that's in the 2nd position on my top 10 solo games from 2020 is Under Falling Skies from CGE, and my community placed this in the 9th position on their list of 15. So we definitely both got it into the top 10. I had it quite a bit higher than my community, but a lot of people really, really like this one, and I can see why. First off, it's only a solo game. It's the only way you can play the game, so it's obviously going to be best played solo. Time-wise, 20 to 40 minutes. That's fantastic. I think that might be the lowest play time in terms of the amount of time that the publisher is specifying it takes to play the game in a range. I agree with that. I think this is a really quick game to the table. It's so quick, in fact, once you're done, you'll want to set up and play it again. It's addicting, believe me. And then on top of it, weight-wise, it's around average. And you're not going to have a hard time wrapping your head around this once you get going. It's the quick, the decisions within the game themselves, the dice play, all that kind of stuff that's really going to wrap you into it. And just that, fear that you're constantly being bombarded by invading aliens, which is just so much fun. So I'll show you a couple shots of the game so you can see it. Again, it's not a big box game. It doesn't take up a lot of space on the table. I'm hoping here I can get some actual table shots. Here's a good example. This is a perfect shot right there of what it looks like on the table. That's like literally everything sitting there. And you can see you've got these alien invaders coming in at you and stuff like that, and you have to deal with it. It's just, it's so good. It's so good. So it's so good, in fact, and I'm so happy to have this in the second position. I'm actually going to be adding a copy of Under Falling Skies to my Rolling Solo Community giveaway, which is running until the end of the year. So technically, when this video releases, that giveaway, which is for a whole bunch of games, they're all going to end. There's going to be no more way to enter any of those giveaways, but this giveaway is going to start and be running at the same time as I release this particular top 10 list. So in the description below and in the pinned comment, you will see a link that will take you to the entry where you can actually drop your information in to get in on the draw for a copy of Under Falling Skies. Whoever wins, I will ship the game out to you, and I'll be more than happy to do that because I really think this is a fantastic game. So I'm excited to kind of be able to shoot that at the door to somebody in my community as a way of saying thank you for the support over 2020. And of course, in the near future, I'm going to be doing a video that covers all the winners from the giant community giveaway that I did over the past month or so. But yeah, this is a great game. If you can find it right now, go after it. I honestly think you should. But you may not be able to find it for a while because it's being sought after quite hard. That's pretty much it for this second position. So hey, let's move on to the final spot. In the number 1 position on the top 10 solo games from 2020 is Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. This is my selection for number 1, and it does actually match for the first time between this list and my Rolling Solo Community list I released a few weeks ago, or actually more like a couple weeks ago. We actually have something that lines up, and that's the top choice. And I truly believe Jaws of the Lion is at number 1, and there's nothing else that belongs up there for 2020. And there's so many reasons to go through. I'll try to sum this up quickly. I did this actually during the Rolling Solo Community, but I'll mention it here as well for those that are just seeing this video only. Essentially, Jaws of the Lion is going to be like the prequel to Gloomhaven the Kickstarter. Gloomhaven the Kickstarter was massively successful, had 90 plus scenarios inside the box, which is a ton to consume. And you'll see this particular game only has 25. So it's much more approachable. It's a smaller box size. It's not going to overwhelm you. Everything fits back inside the insert quite nicely, even just the one that's inside the box. It's quite tight, but it all gets in there. And there's some organizers for the different things. Basically, the game is scaled down to a point where new individuals can come in and play the game and enjoy it. It also offers the best introduction to a game ever in terms of how it treats you in the tutorial stages. Instead of just saying, here, read a rule book, and then forget about 20 pages of it because we only really needed 5 pages of learning there for you to play the first scenario. This thing basically says, start playing the game, grab these essential items, and get going. And the rulebook has these blue notes inside of it that point to different areas, telling you exactly what those things are, only when you need to know them. And then your cards that are in your hand, instead of you being confused by a particular card and its symbol or iconography on the card, it literally will just spell out exactly what it means. So that if you're completely confused, you still can actually get a good grasp as to what's going on. And I really think they nailed that. On the table, like this is an example of the card here, so it might just say, fairly simply, to attack 3, range 2 or 3, but then it'll spell out what that actually means rules-wise. You don't have to go digging in the rule book for stuff like that, right? You can just start playing and enjoying it. The learn to play guide is something that needs to happen more often in most games. There's so many games out there that say, here's 30 pages of rules. You're going to begin your scenario now, but guess what? You only really need to know 3 pages of this. The rest of this is just fluff for the time being. And now you're just overwhelmed with how much stuff you had to jam in your head, and you probably forgot half of it anyway. This is a much more preferred way of learning. And now I think in the future, going forward, for people that haven't played Gloomhaven before, Jaws of the Lion is going to have legs simply because it'll be the one in the series that everyone points to and says, not only is it the prequel to Gloomhaven, meaning story-wise you should consume this 25 scenario campaign first, but also it's the best for learning the game. And for those of us like myself that came from the Gloomhaven Kickstarter, this is a game that allows you to relearn the game in a well done fashion. So instead of having to pick up the rulebook and read the regular Gloomhaven rulebook, you can just read the Jaws of the Lion rulebook or just follow through the intro scenarios, and bam, everything gets hammered home back in terms of the rules really quick. I love this game. I think it's fantastic. Now, I've been a fan of Gloomhaven for a while. You guys probably know this. I have like 135 plus videos on the channel from back when the first one came out. I knew there was something special about this game, which is why I backed the original printing. We had tons of people watching those videos. It was a blast to run through that Kickstarter with Isaac and to be a part of the second iteration, plus to be a part of Frosthaven. This is a retail release, so there's no Kickstarter connection here, which is another reason I think that this one is really special for this year, is that you can just go to retail and buy it. For solo gaming and the community in general, it's going to bring people into the hobby this year, and has been bringing people into the hobby this year, because you can find this game at places like Target in the States and things like that. But I think longevity wise in the future, this is going to be a game that people recommend for a long time to come. It's shot up so high on all these lists already on Board Game Geek that it's going to become a standard commonplace game to recommend people. This is not a game that's going to just disappear over time. Another thing I really enjoyed about it that actually this individual has done too is proxied in a bunch of items. I think during my original playthroughs, I was proxying in doors. Like, you find random terrain from other games and just make it even more exciting than it already is, to give it that 3D touch kind of thing, or that 3-dimensional look. The other thing that's nice is your characters can come over from Jaws of the Lion into the giant Gloomhaven experience. Like, there's so much to love here. So long story short, Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion is my number one. It wasn't even close in my mind. There's not a single game on this list that I would ever exchange this game for. I really, really, truly believe that. Now, there's individuals that will say, I didn't like Gloomhaven. I don't like the card play. I don't like what it did. I don't like what it's about, or how it works, or anything about it. That's perfectly fine. And it's understandable, because guess what? Not every game is going to fit every person. For me, this is a bang up winner. It is 100% the number one. But for somebody else, it's not. And that's perfectly fine, because nobody's opinion is any more valid than anybody else's. So what I would like is, in the comments below, let me know your top X list. Doesn't have to be 10, doesn't even have to be 5. Just whatever it is that released this year as a core game experience. Put them in order and let me know. I think the community it'll be really interesting to read through them, because we might find some games that weren't mentioned. And that's really what I'm kind of getting after. There's a lot of gems out there that don't always get enough appreciation for how well they're designed. And I really think 2020 was a nice lucky fluke year for these small publishers of solo games to seep through the cracks of where maybe Kickstarter games or big retail releases would normally kind of be flooding everywhere. So these smaller box games got a chance to shine this year, meaning that these small publishers and their well-designed games are pushing through, which is awesome, because some of these smaller publishers could end up turning into a medium-sized publisher quite soon if they have a game that has legs that can actually go for quite a while. And I think there's a handful of games on this top 10 list I really truly believe will still be talked about in 5 years' time. Easy. But yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching. I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Under Falling Skies, I mentioned that I was going to do a giveaway for that. So I'll mention it again in case you missed it and you just skipped to the end of the video right now to catch this. But essentially, I'm doing a giveaway for that. The link will be in the description and in the pinned comment. If you go to that link, you can get your entry in for the game. I'm not sure how long I'll run the giveaway for, but by the time I release this video, the giant giveaway on the channel will have just wrapped up, and I still haven't announced the winners from that, but I will be doing that in early January at some point when time permits with all the crazy holiday season stuff. But I just wanted to make mention of the fact that you guys can get in on this this one giveaway for Under Falling Skies, because I really truly believe that's a great game, and want to say a big thank you back to the community again. That somebody will be able to enjoy that. And so I'm not sure, like I said, when that giveaway will end. I might run it for a month or maybe half a month just to make sure I can get as many people in from the community as possible, because I know the holidays are a busy time. But long story short, I really hope something on this list, checks a box for you. You kind of look at it and go, oh, that game looks interesting. Or maybe I didn't like the look of this one, or I didn't think I'd be interested in that, but now I kind of want to dig into it a bit more. Or maybe nothing does. And if nothing does, that's perfectly fine too. And if nothing does, please let me know what interests you this year, because that's even more intriguing to me than somebody, listing out games that I've even seen. So I'm good either way. So let me know in the comments below. I'd love to get the conversation going. It would be fantastic reference for other solo gamers to come here. And that's going to wrap up another list video. I need to say a big time thank you. Well, first off, congratulations to all the different individuals involved in each of the games mentioned on this list, but also a big thank you to those individuals for providing us entertainment. But that's going to do it, everyone. I know you're currently in 2021 because that's when this is going to get released. I'm still stuck in 2020, and I can tell you right now, I'm really excited to get out of it. But long story short, I am excited for what 2021 is going to bring. Thank you guys so much for your support. Make sure you get your entries in for the giveaway, and keep on rolling solo.